Once a month, KD10S, K1IX, N1ZCD, KD1QS, K1DIN meet in the Marlboro Middle School cafeteria. The rest of the time, these hams talk to each other from the privacy of their own homes or wherever they happen to be.
I think somebody wants to find us as that hobby where two guys go out, buy a whole bunch of equipment, go home, set it up, and talk to each other about what they bought.
These hams and about 70 others are members of the Algonquin Amateur Radio Club. The club has been in Marlboro since 1976, and since then they've grown into a vital community resource.
Anytime we have any emergencies in the city, it's just a matter of a telephone call to one or two individuals, and they're all here, about 15 of them. Big volunteers for the city of Marlboro, both emergency management and many other areas for the city.
David Haralimbo is the club president.
The Algonquin Amateur Radio Club provides backup emergency communications and support to organizations within the Marlboro community, including fire, EMS, and of course we do stuff like security for the parades, and we do work with the hazmat days and helping the city.
The club members are drawn together by an interest in technology and radio communication.
The camaraderie, of course, between all the people involved in the organization, that's one of the best things. And getting out and getting together as a group, we get to do a lot of stuff. And giving something back to the community as well is a wonderful feature.
The first radios developed at the beginning of the 20th century were really amateur radios, examples of that human drive to communicate.
Hello?
In today's world, our communication needs have been many outlets, from instant messaging to cell phones, but amateur radio still have their place.
As in Hurricane Katrina recently, amateur radio proved to be one of the few links that survived and was able to maintain communications even though all the cell phone towers went down and email went down and computers went down. Amateur operators were able to provide continued processing of information to allow people to communicate and get word out of the community of what was needed in a very timely fashion. Because the first thing that happened when all the power went out is all the cell phone towers died within the first day or two because they didn't have power for their generators. So there's a definite need to maintain the amateur radio service.
Because of amateur radio's usefulness during emergencies, the Marlboro Emergency Management Team works closely with the Algonquin Amateur Radio Club. If the computers and phone networks die, the hams would still be able to coordinate emergency response efforts in Marlboro.
If we had a major disaster here in the city where we lost a fire in police radios, we would have police crews, we would have ham radio operators in the police station as well as in the cruisers as well as in the fire trucks to give us communications.
Yes, I am currently at the Algonquin Amateur Radio Club, and we are demonstrating the radio system to the local cable channel.
Good to have that demo going on. Anybody have any comments they want to make to WMPOW or anybody that will be listening in over there?
While the technology and the camaraderie are a big attraction for radio club operators, the opportunities to learn are also important. The learning begins with a test for the initial operator's license and goes on from there.
There are a lot of things to learn all the time, and it's one of those hobbies that there's just tons to read. And of course, I'm a general class operator right now, and I'm going for my amateur extra class soon, I hope. But there's a big, thick manual of things to learn, and some of it I know, some of it I don't know. I'll have to have other people teach me that.
And
so
you like that?
I love that.
After you get your license, the FCC issues you a call sign. Now all you need is a radio and a microphone, and you're ready to make contact.
At that point, you're ready to go. You can go out and pick up just a little portable, or you can go all out and add to it. I started out with a little portable, and it's growing.
One of the places hams get equipment is at flea markets, like the one the Algonquin Amateur Radio Club holds every February.
If I get call across radio America. Right across America, I will call.
This here is an antenna for amateur radio for 10 meters, and I'm going to, I don't know, it was in a grab box for $1, so I'm going to plug it in and see if it works.
I'm showing this piece of equipment that I built myself. And so I'm just showing it to some of my friends so they can see what I've done and so on and so forth. It's a monitoring piece of equipment for radio transmitters. I've been coming to this flea market since 1979, when Carl Field, W1SLH, was still living and helped put it together and so on and so forth, which is how I became introduced to the flea market. It's a great organization and I'm glad to be here.
When they talk, ham radio operators send their signal to a repeater on Sligo Hill, which then repeats the messages to other radio operators. Club member Tim Akita found the radio club to be a great way to get hooked into the community after moving to the area from California.
It's very easy to move between different places, to simply call up on the different calling frequencies or call up different repeaters or just talk on the radio and find other people that are interested in what you're doing, helping you set up your stations and giving you advice and support to get up and running again. So it's a very open and friendly community.
And plugging into the network of amateur radio operators isn't possible only in the U.S. It's also possible worldwide.
In 1991, as a member of the Massachusetts-Ukraine Citizens Bridge, I went to Ukraine for the first time. One of the first things that we did, or that I did, was to get in touch with the president of the Nikolaev Amateur Radio Society. And he couldn't speak English, but we had just enough common language on amateur radio that we could talk to each other.
Yes, good evening, gentlemen. The name here is Pete, Papa Echo Tango Echo. And yeah, I'm on the motorcycle, but I pulled over to the side of the road here. Initially, you just want to be able to use the repeaters, to be able to use the two-way radios. Then the next thing you know, you want to be able to work Africa. You want to be able to work the west coast of Africa, work into the Middle East, and be able to do it from home, but also be able to do it from the car. I mean, it's something else to work into the Middle East with 5 watts sideband from the parking lot of a supermarket just because you heard somebody in there. So you pick up the microphone and you answer the call back, and then you talk. Next thing you know, you're talking to somebody in Israel or you're talking to somebody in Jordan.
For more information about amateur radio and how you can get involved, visit the Algonquin Amateur Radio Club's website or the website for the American Radio Relay League.
There's all kinds of people out there. It's a very fascinating world when you get involved in ham radio. So I'll toss it back to you, and I'll let you guys get on with the net. I just wanted to check in. I heard you guys in there. So I will say 73s to all, and you all have a good night. KD1QS, back to net.
From Marlboro Magazine, I'm Melissa Gugliotti.
It's going wonderful. The wind is blowing, we got good color, we got a lot of cranberries. What more can you ask for?
How about a warmer winter? Kirby Gilmore is in a race with the seasons to harvest as many cranberries as possible, all before his bogs turn to ice.
This season's excellent, yes. The season is excellent. So we're happy right now.
And so are juice drinkers across the country. Customers seldom stop to think how their cranberry juice lands on their local supermarket shelf. But we did just that, and what we found were a couple of Middleborough residents with anything but a typical job. This is their story.
My husband's family was in the business, and my family was in the business. I'm 5th generation, and my husband is 4th generation of his side of the family and my family. And then my husband and I, in 1976, 77, started our own cranberry company with 2.5 acres of bog.
Now, 30 years later, Susan owns and manages 150 acres of bogs, and with the help of Kirby, they harvest the berries from mid-September to late November.
Let's say you started at the end of August, beginning of September, you would have whiter fruit. The longer the berries stay on the vine and the cooler the nights, the redder the cranberry gets.
As we start out, we get fairly good color. At the end, we get excellent color.
That's not to say red berries are any better than the white. They're both harvested. In fact, if you try both berries before they're processed, chances are you won't like either.
Well, I like this taste. This taste is very, very tart, but it's not so tart that I can't eat it fresh. But most consumers don't like eating this fruit like this, so that's why we process it and make juice out of it, or sweetened dried cranberries, which are called craisins, or cranberry sauce.
Cranberries don't grow underwater. These bogs have been flooded so water wheels, like this one, can loosen the berries from the vines.
This is what we call picking. That's a picking machine, and he's picking the berries. The discs go around. There's discs on there that go around and knock the fruit off without bruising them, off the vines. The fruit floats to the top. So as you can see out there, this portion of the bog has already been picked. The berries will then float, and whichever way the wind's blowing, the berries will go towards the area. The wind's blowing this way, so all the berries are going over there.
So now that the cranberries have been harvested, how do they get from the bogs to your supermarket?
We have some people that are harvesting, that are taking the cranberries off. Other people are coming and taking the cranberries out of the cranberry bog, and other people are driving the trucks to take them to Ocean Spray.
Once the trucks reach Ocean Spray, the berries are assorted and cleaned. Some will be processed immediately, while others will be frozen and processed later in the year. The processed juice is then poured into bottles, labeled, and then boxed up for delivery. Next time you're sipping on a glass of cranberry juice, chances are those berries grew and were processed only miles from Marlboro. For Marlboro Magazine, I'm Alyssa Gagliotti. When the first Labor Day parade was held in Marlboro in 1952, the city was uniquely positioned to take a parade and make it its own. The American Legion Drum and Bugle Corps, located in Marlboro, sowed the seeds of pride in musical accomplishment by winning state and national championships.
It's just natural that they turned and thought of a parade. Let's get some bands, let's get some music, let's get people singing and dancing again. And they did. 1952 was a very difficult time in the city of Marlboro. Our shoe factories were closing. People had come back from World War II, still looking to find employment, while at the same time factories were closing. So we obviously ended up with a very high unemployment rate. At the same time, the Korean War was in progress, and Marlboro boys were dying regularly, and the wounded were coming home, and the spirits of the city were very low. Mayor Gad Boyce decided everybody needed a morale booster. This was a working class town back then. I think it still is. And Labor Day was an important day to them, and so it was decided that Labor Day would be our day of celebration, and we would have a big end of summer fun fest.
The parade was the brainchild of the then Recreation Director Lou Galoni, son of the former business manager of the Drum and Bugle Corps. Parades seemed to be in his blood.
I grew up as a parade junkie because every weekend I'd be in the back seat of the car waiting to go to a parade or a drum corps competition. So when I became Recreation Director through the mayor's funding, I proposed to him that we have a parade. And of course he was familiar with the drum corps being here. And he said, if you think you can do it, let's go for it. But it took a lot of courage for him to get the money up, a lot of true grit, so to speak, to get the money up, because there were people constantly fighting any new proposal, and this was a new proposal. So we went for it.
Immediately, the parade was a hit. Every year, the parade and its response grew, and it wasn't long before Marlboro had made a musical name for itself again.
The reputation of the city really expanded and grew all across the state. Everybody knew Marlboro as a result of the parade.
In 1960, Marlboro celebrated the 300th anniversary of its founding as a town. So all efforts that year went into making a special tercentennial parade instead of the accustomed Labor Day parade.
Tercentennial parade was in June, and we didn't have a Labor Day parade that Labor Day, but we had a 3-day festival. In the following 2 years, we figured that we couldn't get any better than the 300th anniversary, and we didn't want to go downhill. So for 2 years, we had 3- and 4-day festivals.
But by 1963, the Labor Day Parade was back, and by 1972 had 54 musical units and was just shy of 4 hours long. Today's parade has 24 units and runs about 2 hours.
Into the 70s, the parade still was an excellent take. We had several of our own local drum and bugle corps, bands that were participating. And toward the end of the 70s, these units all began to fade. And several factors came into play. One was the fact that rock and roll was taking hold. Kids' interests were developing differently. Everybody wanted to be a guitarist. Our schools, due to Proposition 2.5, schools all over the state began to decrease or eliminate their music programs, which basically eliminated the foundation of music in the state. And as a result, units began to just disappear. So it became much, much harder to find good, solid units for the parade.
In 1977, after 26 years of the helm of the Labor Day Parade, Lou Galoni stepped down. Then Mayor Kelleher decided to put the administration of the parade in the hands of a committee. In 1981, George Wappen was asked by the mayor's office to take the reins. Wappen has seen the parade through the 80s, 90s, and up to today. He is the one who instituted the use of themes. The 2005 theme is Favorite Traditions. Over the past 54 years, there have been many favorite acts from large bands of the 50s and 60s to newer multicultural groups and novelty acts. The position of the Grand Marshal of Labor Day Parade has risen in prominence and in the town and reads like a list of who's who in the community. All Grand Marshals are chosen for the commitment and service they've given to the city over the years. Originally intended to boost Marlboro's spirits and get them singing and dancing again, the parade has kept us singing and dancing for the past 54 years and has itself become one of our favorite traditions. Nowadays, apple cider is available year-round, but fall is a time when local cider mills do their strongest business. Frank Carlson is part owner of Carlson Orchards in Harvard, Mass.
This time of the year, September, October, November, when the farm stands are all open, is one of our busiest times of the year. It's the busiest time for us.
Apple cider has been around for a long time. Since the English brought over their apple seeds, Americans have been enjoying this drink in its many varieties. We went to local apple orchard and farm store Honey Pot Hill Orchards in Stowe to see how their cider is made.
We're making cider today at Honey Pot Hill Orchards. Right here we've got the apples that we're going to use for making cider. And the apples we use are primarily McIntosh apples that come from our orchards. A lot of them are drops, which get picked up after apple picking. They're dumped or put into 15 bushel bins, which get dumped into the large hopper. Okay, here we're inspecting the apples to make sure nothing of poor quality is going to make the cider. And anything that's not quite right gets cut out or thrown away. After that, they get washed and scrubbed up real good. And they go through the elevator, up the elevator, to where they're ground up into a nice mash, kind of like mashed potatoes. And from there, they're pumped over to where the actual layers of what we'd call pulp or pumice are built up, about 2 inches thick, and about 15 layers are built up. To about 2.5 feet in height. After that's finished, it gets rolled over and squeezed out at 2,500 pounds pressure, which yields about 50 gallons of juice per, I should say cider, per bin of apples. From there it goes into refrigerated tanks. It will be chilled down to about 35 degrees, and then it'll be bottled. From the bottling, it goes into gallons, half gallons, and little small containers. and then goes into our farm store.
Every cider maker has their own blend of apple varieties that go into cider, but in the beginning of the season, McIntosh are the primary variety.
Mostly McIntosh. It's one of the best varieties for making juice, but we tend to blend several varieties together as we have them. It can vary as the season goes on, and the cider gets sweeter as the season goes on because the starches in the apples change to sugar and yields a sweeter cider.
At both Carlson Orchards and Honey Pot Hill Orchards, apples go through an inspective and cleaning process before pressed, but the two orchards differ in the way they treat their cider before it goes for sale. Honey Pot Hill Orchards treats the cider with UV rays, while at Carlson, the cider is pasteurized.
Because we pasteurize our cider, we're very busy doing ciders for other small farms that they couldn't justify a pasteurizer for their smaller operations and more seasonal operations, where we make cider year-round.
In addition to pasteurizing their cider, Carlson Orchards also offers 2 labels, including one that contains preservatives. However, since most cider's preservative-free, it needs to be refrigerated as soon as possible. The shelf life of unpreserved cider is about 2 weeks. Apple juice is different from apple cider in that its filters has preservatives and is pasteurized. But for those who want the pure experience of apple cider, there are many ways to enjoy it.
I guess the most common way is just cold as a beverage, as a drink that way. Another way, as soon as the temperature drops down, is to heat it up and put some cinnamon stick and cloves with it, orange peel and so forth. Another way is putting some of your favorite spirits with it on a cold day.
At this time of year, everyone goes crazy for cider donuts. Honey Pot Hill Orchards let us watch them make the donuts one recent morning. Delicious, high in fiber and vitamins, apple cider is one of our favorite ways to enjoy the fall. For a listing of local cider mills near Marlborough, visit the website of the Massachusetts Department of Agricultural Resources. For Marlborough Magazine, I'm Alyssa Gugliotti.
Long ago, but not so very long ago, the world was different, oh yes it was. You settled down and you built a town and made it live, and you watched it grow. It was your town.
Cities are usually built on business. Towns in and around the Metro West area built themselves on textile mills. They needed flowing rivers to run their factories.
But here in Marlborough, business was based on the shoe industry. It began in the mid-1800s and lasted until the early 1980s.
Marlborough had been around since 1660, roughly 170 years before the shoe industry came to be, but the opportunity for it was seen early on.
Marlborough was an agricultural community for hundreds of years. It had very fertile land, so it encouraged farmers to raise livestock, including goats, pigs, cows. There were a lot of horses. And farmers were hardworking people and they needed protection for their shoes. So individuals would actually make shoes for families, friends, and neighbors. Once in a while they might get a little ambitious and spread out and start making a lot more shoes.
From there, the first shoe factory was built in 1836 by brothers Samuel and Joseph Boyd. The location was here on Maple Street.
It was their father's house and they put an addition on the side of it. And they were making shoes then. So officially, we've been using that as the date of, the official startup. Of course, prior to that, there were other people that were doing making shoes, but individually, you know, just like one person in their house making shoes. And matter of fact, that's how making shoes was, up until then, was basically something like that, you know, an individual just making, not a factory.
In 1849, the Boyd and Corey Company improved on the business. Samuel Boyd, with his brother Joseph, no longer a partner, realized that one person making a shoe was no longer the best way to go.
He said, wait a minute, why don't we have 6 or 8 people making one shoe? Do it sort of in a production type thing. One person did a certain part of the shoe, and then it passed on to the next one, and so forth and so forth. And that kind of brought in the manufacturing on a large scale. Everybody else started picking up on that.
With that progression, Marlboro became one of the largest shoe manufacturers in the country. In fact, the Boyd and Corey Company were known for having the largest factory per square foot in the United States. The next businessman to throw his hat in the shoe ring would become one of the most successful. He would also become mayor.
As Herbert Howell came along, and they were very, very big. He had 3 big factories in Marlboro.
Howe ensured the product got to Boston with the help of 2 perfectly placed train stations in the city.
Not only to get workers back and forth in their community, but also to ship these shoes and boots to Boston, mainly, where they would be put on boats to be shipped to other parts of the United States, or even locally to other towns north and west of here.
Although the Boyd and Corey Company had 3 large factories here in the city and were known as one of the top manufacturers in the country, it was another company that put Marlboro on the map, the John Fry & Son Company.
We all call it Fry Boot Company because they're famous for Fry boots. When I was community development director in Marlboro back in the late 70s, early 80s, I attended a economic development conference in Zurich, Switzerland. And they gave us some boots to bring over to give away. And we hung them in our booth and said, put your business card in to win a pair of. Everybody over there knew Fry boots. People from Belgium, from Germany, from all over Europe, they knew Fry boots.
1863 was the year that John Fry started his shoe company. The famous boots would come later. They started out making shoes, including pairs for children. Fry seemed to stay ahead of the competition, and an example of this was when his factory was the first to use electricity.
They had a couple salesmen that would go out, you know, selling, and the salesman got back to him once and said, boy, we've got this problem. Two of our competitors are underpricing us tremendously, you know, and what do I do? And he said to him, well, you just keep going along and you say to them, just make sure that they can deliver their goods, what they're saying, at that price. And immediately after that, after he talked to his salesman, went out to all the places where he bought all the leather and locked up all the leather in the whole area. He bought as much as all he could and all future orders. And then he went back and just waited. And within a week, he started getting calls from his competitors saying, you can't do this to us and so forth. Because they were trying to put him out of business by underpricing him. And he ended up putting them out of business. So he was a real shrewd businessman.
The shoe industry was a booming business in the mid to late 1800s, but there was one particular event that really put these factories over the top.
One of the main reasons, too, that shoes and boots were in so much demand was the Civil War was occurring. And so the soldiers who marched many miles and through very unfavorable conditions needed really sturdy, strong shoes.
That was a real boom day for people like Boyd and Corey and Herbert Howell, even he just started in '59. And so it was, I would say that really shot the shoe industry, boom, off on, you know, it's a big success for quite a few years was because of that, the growth area.
Even as the machine age came to be, which helped to increase production, the factory workers were a major part of what these businesses were doing.
Well, most of them in the early days were Irish immigrants that came over here until probably the 1870s through 1870s, 80s, 90s. We had a big influx of French Canadian came down because they heard about the shoe. You know, all it takes is like one relative someone to come down here, and then they send a letter home, there's plenty of work here, come on down. And they start coming down, and that was, the railroad depot on Mechanic Lincoln that came from Pittsburgh was always having French Canadians coming in because they were coming from the north, from Canada. They came down through that way. And then they'd get on the train and come down into Marlborough. So it was basically Irish immigrants and then the French Canadians in those years. And then when it got up into the 40s and 50s, there were the Greeks started to immigrate into Marlborough. So, but mainly it was the Irish and the French Canadians.
The shoe industry was very prosperous until the late 1890s when the unionized factory workers went on strike. 3,500 employees walked out in order to get better wages. The strike would last 6 months.
The owners of factories were upset because now some new factories were popping up in New York and other places, and they were using cheap labor. It wasn't unions, and we had unions up here, and so they were trying to cut get them to come down on their demands and so forth. So things that even happen today, as we know. So it started back then, but it was after that that slowly but surely the shoe industry started to go down.
More factories popping up in other parts of the country saw the demand for shoes in Marlborough go down. Factories would start to close or move down south, where labor was cheaper.
Main Street isn't Main Street anymore. No one seems to need us like they did before. It's hard to find a reason left to stay. It's our town. We love it anyway. Come what may, it's our town.
A lot of foreign imports were happening. The shoes were being made a lot cheaper in Chile and places like that. And that was hurting the manufacturing of shoes up around here. I know that that was one of the big things back to like that 1898-99 strike. We were getting to that point towards the end too, was labor was very high and so forth, and they were either closing down or moving down south or other places the factories were.
Jeanette Trollson works for the Holiday Inn, but when she was 16 years old, she moved from Vermont with her brother in order to find steady pay in the shoe factories. She worked in the Fry factory from the age of 18 to 21.
I did packing, I did cinching, as they call it. It's when you take the boot itself, the cowboy boots, most of them were made of that, and you get a big fire gun and you just singe them. So we did that, and then I progressed from that to piecework, where you sewed some part of the shoes and you made extra money on that.
Jeanette remembers fondly her time in the shoe factories. There was no air conditioning at the time, so it could get hot.
Some people had fans. You could bring sometimes a fan in. I always liked it because I was learning new things from the shoe factories, and it was hard work. I mean, your hand got blistered. They were very strict. You had to sit at your seat. You had a 15-minute break, and then you had a half-hour lunch, but that was it. You worked long hours. I worked long hours when I was on piecework because I wanted to make the money. But I was grateful for the job.
Jeanette was also grateful for the time she spent with the people she worked with in the factories.
They were great people, wonderful people working in those places. They were warm, especially I was one of the youngest one. They took you in, they helped you work.
Jeanette once worked for another well-known Marlboro shoe company, the Curtis Shoe Factory. Charles W. Curtis worked for the Rice and Hutchins Shoe Factory, and in 1928, when that company was liquidated, he saw an opportunity.
My great-grandfather, Charles Curtis, acquired one of the factories, which was the the major factory at the time on Cotting Avenue in 1928. And with his 4 sons, they renamed the business the Curtis Shoe Company, Inc.
The Curtis Shoe Factory was the supplier for the United States Navy in World War II. A special ceremony was held on July 3, 1943, in order to present Admiral Chester Nimitz with the 1 millionth pair of Curtis shoes.
I think they did feel quite honored, quite proud. My great-grandfather had many grandsons in the war, in both theaters, in both Europe and the Pacific. He, by nature, was a very patriotic guy.
As Marlboro reached the second half of the 20th century, Curtis, as well as the other shoe factories, moved out of town or just went out of business. Some factories stood empty for years, a hollow reminder of what once was in this city.
The shoe industry did put Marlboro on the map. The construction of 495, the Mass Pike, and 290 helped to solidify that. With big corporations firmly planted here in the city, Marlboro has become a centerpiece of the state of Massachusetts, just as this former factory reminds us how the city was built and how far we've come. For the magazine, I'm Kristen Doucette.
You're watching Living History. If you've just joined us, we've been learning all about the history of City Hall. Now, we're moving on to an industry that was well known for putting Marlboro on the map. Shoes. Here is Living History special correspondent, Kristen Doucette.
Long ago, but not so very long ago, the world was different, oh yes it was. You settled down and you built a town and made it live, and you watched it grow. It was your town.
Cities are usually built on business. Towns in and around the Metro West area built themselves on textile mills. They needed flowing rivers to run their factories.
But here in Marlboro, business was based on the shoe industry. It began in the mid-1800s and lasted until the early 1980s.
Marlboro had been around since 1660, roughly 170 years before the shoe industry came to be, but the opportunity for it was seen early on.
Marlboro was an agricultural community for hundreds of years. It had very fertile land, so it encouraged farmers to raise livestock, including goats, pigs, cows. There were a lot of horses. And farmers were hardworking people and they needed protection for their shoes. So individuals would actually make shoes for families, friends, and neighbors. Once in a while they might get a little ambitious and spread out and start making a lot more shoes.
From there, the first shoe factory was built in 1836 by brothers Samuel and Joseph Boyd. The location was here on Maple Street.
It was their father's house, and they put an addition on the side of it, and they were making shoes then. So